So today's video is all about growing ginger, and we can't just grow ginger in the garden in the UK. We don't have the right climate for it, but if we create that environment artificially, ginger will grow quite happily, and we just need to follow some simple rules to create that and copy that environment. Now, the first thing you need to know about ginger is it is not a root, it is a rhizome. And what that means is it's actually part of the stem of the plant, and it grows along under the surface, putting up shoots as it goes, and in the process expands the size of its rhizome. So with that in mind, we need to think about the container that we're going to grow it in, because just growing it in the garden is not going to work. So we need to put it in a pot, and we need to keep it indoors, certainly until the summer warms up. And because it grows horizontally, laterally, then you want a wide pot that isn't really that deep. And you can buy nice pots in the garden centre and all that for this kind of thing. I've bought a washing up bowl for £1.29 in B&M's and drilled some holes in it. So once you've got your pot ready, you need to buy a piece of ginger. Now, I got this in a garden centre because I was there anyway, but paid way over the price, really. I think it was £3.50 for this piece. You could go to the supermarket and just go through an open tub of ginger, loose ginger, and select a piece. And what you're looking for is the biggest piece that you can get that has got sprouts starting to form, or eyes on it. So if you see this piece here, it's growing eyes, sprouts in several places, and the more nodes or more eyes you've got on it, and the bigger the piece of ginger, then the more productive that rhizome is going to be. So when you get your piece of ginger back home or down to your allotment plot, then if it's a big piece and it's got eyes and nodules all over it, you can actually cut that into segments, making sure that there's 2 or 3 eyes on each piece, so you can multiply your starting rhizomes. If you do that, you can see that this one's been cut there. Just leave it for a few days for that to heal over and go hard, and then it's good for planting. Now, before you plant the ginger, soak it overnight in some tepid water, and what that will do is hydrate that piece of ginger, that rhizome, so that when you plant it, it's ready to go. So to create the conditions to grow the ginger, the first thing we need to understand is its natural habitat, its natural environment. Where does it just grow like a weed? And that is Southeast Asia, and it will grow in tropical forests, subtropical, tropical forests, and it grows on the forest floor. So that gives us a clue as to what kind of soil it's going to want. It's going to want a very rich compost type soil that is very free draining. Ginger hates to be waterlogged, and if you imagine what that soil's made up of, it's going to be lots of organic matter, leaves falling down from the canopy, bits of wood, sticks. It's going to have a very rich structure. So that's what we need to recreate. So to recreate that really rich composty like material, I'm going to use my homemade compost, which I know is very nutritious. It's got a lot of goodness in it. It's very rich, and it's also got some little bits of wood in it and things like that. And this has been sieved, so it is quite fine. Now, ginger really likes a well drain. It will not tolerate being waterlogged. So to aid the drainage in this soil, I'm going to add sharp sand. Now, sharp sand you can just buy from a builder's yard. If you wanted to, you could add perlite, or you could add vermiculite. I'm going to use sand because I've got a big bulk bag of it on the drive, it's cheap, and it will do the job perfectly well. So I'm just going to add some of this in, and then I'm going to mix the compost and the sand together. So now I've got that tub filled with a mixture of compost and sand. I haven't got an exact ratio for that, but probably a bit more compost than there is sand. I'm just going to place the rhizome on there. I'm not going to bury it at the moment. You don't want to bury this very deep. It just needs to be covered. It grows just under the surface. So, and because these rhizomes and these nodes are mainly pointing this way, because this side has been cut off, I'm going to plant it or put it on the soil more towards one side, because it's going to grow this way. And now I've done that, I'm going to simulate the forest floor a bit more by adding some bigger pieces of wood. And all of this sand and these pieces of wood will aid with drainage. And I'm just going to mix those in a little bit around the rhizome. What you're trying to simulate here is conditions that it would grow in a tropical forest. And because we're not growing it in its natural environment, unless you're lucky enough to live near a tropical forest, then we need to do everything we can to try and simulate that environment and keep it as happy as we possibly can, so that we get a good harvest. So now we've got the rhizome in place and we've got our soil prepared. I just need to cover this literally ½ an inch, no more. And to do that, I'm just going to use some more homemade compost. Now this compost is quite damp, it's been outside, so I'm not going to water this now. And the rhizome's hydrated anyway, I've kept it in water overnight. So this does not need any more water, and you can see how shallow that covering is. Not much at all. So I won't water that now until it starts to shoot, and even then, if the compost is still really damp, I'm not going to water it. It hates to be waterlogged, so you need to kind of be quite careful how you water ginger. So now we've got the ginger rhizome in the soil, it's in the pot. We need to think about temperature. So Southeast Asia is where it's from, and that means we need a temperature of between 20 and 30 degrees for it to be happy. So that means in the UK we're going to be growing this and starting this off inside on a windowsill, south facing, and trying to put it in a room that is warm, that stays around those sort of temperatures, or at least the minimum end of it anyway. In the summer, when we've got nice sunny days and it's warm and we've got warm evenings, we can put it outside, but that then brings another problem: light and sunlight. Think about where it grows. It grows on the forest floor, and therefore it's never in direct sunlight. It's always a mottled light with the sun coming down through the canopy and giving the plant partial shade. And that's what we've got to create. We've got to put it in a place that isn't in the direct sun. So if you're going to keep the ginger inside all year in a conservatory or a greenhouse, that's fine, you'll get the temperatures, but you're going to have to provide it some shade, either with netting, foliage from other plants. Make sure that you're not putting it in direct, strong sunlight, because if you do, you're going to end up with scorched leaves and possibly even kill the plant. And if you've spent months bringing it on and looking after it, that's going to be really disappointing. So we want a nice, nutritious, rich, loose draining soil, free draining. We need temperatures of 20 to 30 degrees, and we need partial shade. In the early spring in the UK, that's fine. South facing windowsill, you're not going to have a problem. But just beware as the year gets hotter to give it some shade. Water very sparingly. Don't let it get damp. Keep it moist. Think about the natural environment. Think about the tropical forests. It may rain every single day, but that soil that the ginger is growing in is really free draining. So don't overwater it. Lastly, harvesting. So as your ginger rhizome expands in that pot, you can actually cut pieces off it. You don't have to dig it all up. You can just scrape down, cut a piece off and use it, and leave the rest to grow on. Or if you wanted to, you can wait for the entire plant to grow through and finish, which normally is about 8-10 months, and you could empty the pot, cut up your ginger, keep a piece to sow the next spring, and eat the rest. And on that note, if you want to consume the ginger straight away, that's fine. If you can't possibly eat all of that, then you can freeze it. It freezes really well, and it actually makes it much easier to use when you're cooking. If you've ever tried to grate a piece of ginger, it's very stringy. If you freeze it first and grate it, it just turns into a really fine sort of powder. And then you could either use it straight away, or you could put it on a baking tray, put it in the oven on its lowest setting for about 4 or 5 hours, dehydrate it, and then using a rolling pin or something, you can then break it up into a fine powder and keep it as powdered ginger. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.